On today's episode, we have something special. It's a solo episode, and we're going to talk about 3 really special words. Have you ever felt deep within that there's something more you're supposed to be doing, but you're not sure what? Have you ever felt like you're producing a lot, but not expressing at all? Welcome to She Made It. I'm your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I am on a mission to help you cultivate meaning through the path of creativity. Join me to eavesdrop on conversations with brave women who broke through their resistances into a life of authenticity. Because I believe if she made it, you can too.
So I think this episode is going to be super fun for our listeners, Elle, because you're going to give us a little insight into your day-to-day and how you're able to balance so many things along with creativity.
A little scary too, because this is like my second solo episode, and I'm putting myself out there.
Yeah.
Just like I've asked all my guests to share their story. And so I'm excited to share. And thank you for bringing this as a great idea for us.
And I love this episode, especially because these 3 words that you already mentioned are sort of part of our vocabulary here at the Zimmerman Group. And as our listeners will hear later, this will make more sense. But we actually have a room in our office titled the Moodle Room. Unfortunately, everybody else calls the Noodle Room, which is wrong, but we know that it's the Moodle Room, and you'll hear why that's so important as this episode goes on.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about moodling, dabbling, and batching. Basically, these 3 words are kind of like a core in how I think about, like Clara said, my time and my creativity and how I balance things. It's basically a way that I allow myself, and I'm going to help you give yourself permission and how to make a move. If you keep avoiding creativity, but you know you want it in your life, or you're in a business, or you're in a place of wanting to make a transition and you don't know what to do next, these 3 words have guided me in directions to open up opportunities. And after so many episodes and chatting with different women in all different creative and business industries, moms, singles, all different women who have journeyed through a path of creativity, I've learned that the key to success in the women interviewed is one of these or all of these words. And notice that I didn't use words like launch or strategy or push or land, arrive, accelerate. I use words like batch and moodle and dabble, and they're just so much more fun, and they're also soft. They're soft and they're about process. And the goal of this podcast is to share the journey, the space in between. We talk about she made it, but really what we want to share is how did she get where she is today? What was the process? And I have found that dabbling, moodling, and batching are all part of the journey. And part of the journey is being unsure and not knowing what you're doing, and trying things that feel really foreign and might push you into new areas, but that is how you expand. That is how the journey unfolds. So we literally expand our thoughts and actions in areas that we've never been, but through moodling and dabbling and batching, we do it in a way that is soft and rolling rather than sharp and turning. And I also think that all of this applies when we think about change, because we are in a time in our culture, in our society, where the state of the union with business and our lives is about changing. And we're constantly being required to adapt and pivot so quickly and so often. So whether it's adapting to new technologies, whether it's being aware and learning all that our kids are being exposed to, even keeping up with new ways to go grocery shopping. We do those things and we adapt and change through the same ways, through moodling, thinking about it, dabbling, just trying it, and batching, sitting down and putting focus into something to make a change. So what are these things? I kind of gave you a little hint there, but I'm going to start with batching. Batching, the goal of batching is to create an intentional amount of time for an intentional task and make an intentional effort to focus without distraction. So basically, it's about boundaries. It's about being intentional with our time and our use of our time. But we do that to free up lots of other space and time for the things that we really love. So why I batch because it's a way that I balance my work and my life. I batch how I clean, how I deal with the mundane things. I batch the part of the biz that I'm not fond of, the bookkeeping, sometimes the social media. I'm a full-time mother. I'm a full-time business partner, a full-time wife, a full-time entrepreneur. And if I tried to do all these things at once, my head would probably explode. But this little productivity secret keeps me sane, and I want to share it with you. I'm a firm believer that by focusing on one task for an uninterrupted period of time, it actually focuses to get her done what sometimes drags into our whole day, our whole life. And sometimes these are the things that suck us of our energy, of our mental energy, and our creativity. So a couple ways that I batch to share as some little ideas or tips for you. One, I literally batch water drinking. I know that sounds silly, but I have a really hard time drinking the amount of water that I need, and I know how important that is for my energy and self-care. So it is a rule in my home, in my morning, that I have to drink a big glass of water right out of bed before I have coffee. And then I keep a bottle of water in my car, and I gulp a bottle of water while I'm driving so that I'm literally not sipping through the day. I'm literally batching my water drinking in order to get the amount of water I need in a day. I also batch my laundry. I only do it one day a week. And the kids know that's the day, Saturday. Sometimes it bleeds into Sunday, but I don't do laundry on an ongoing basis. I do my bookkeeping. Everybody on my team knows Fridays are bookkeeping days. I also batch social media. I try to spend a certain amount of time in the morning, sometimes spend a couple of hours per week, so that I'm not doing it every single day, because I have the tendency, probably like many of us, to get sucked into the social media wormhole where I'm trying to produce content and share content, and I get sucked into being the consumer of content. So batching my social media really helps. But the point of all this, and you can really look at any task in your day, whether it's cooking, cleaning, running errands. My favorite one is I batch complaining. I decide, okay, I'm venting. I'm going to give myself a time period. I'm going to vent, and then I'm done. And I move on. So that I'm not festering all day long over something. But the whole point of this is to free up our space, our energy. So, we often say, we're so busy, we don't have time. This is one way to kind of take a little bit of control of your time. The next one I want to talk about is moodling. And this word, which I just love, moodling, it's a word that I learned from Barbara Euland. She wrote the book, If You Want to Write. And she says, the imagination needs moodling, long, inefficient, happy idling, dawdling, and puttering. And it feels so frivolous, and it's almost like ridden with guilt. But when I look at it as a productive process, that it is about creating the space for creation, it's about creating the space for ideas to percolate and settle, then it feels productive. We can have really big ideas, big abstract ideas, but it is the sitting in the space and silence that our ideas can sift through and get more complex and sophisticated, or flesh out or expand or become more detailed. And so we have to give ourselves space to moodle. So today I give you permission to do nothing. And I don't mean like this nothing, meaning scrolling through Facebook, binging on Netflix, playing, listening to a podcast in traffic. That's really not the kind of nothing that moodling is. Moodling is about intentional idleness. It's about taking a walk, not for exercise, but literally just a meandering walk. It's activities that, again, they feel frivolous. They feel like, or could, I should say, they might feel like a waste of time. But it's really about going to the coffee shop for no reason, not bringing your laptop, not inviting a friend, just sitting and taking time to people watch, to take in the sights, the smells, to daydream. It's about turning off the radio, listening to the commute, the sounds of the commute, or opening the windows and listening to the wind. And it's to let your mind wander and your eyes really take in what is around you, to be fully present for the drive. It's about, meditation is having a mindset, and meditation is something we're hearing a lot about, that the importance of being present and breathing. But I would encourage you to practice meditation without instruction, like unguided meditation. There are so many apps out there that talk us through, coach us along being present, being mindful, keeping, attention to our breath. But I would just say set a timer, play some nice music, and let yourself feel a little uncomfortable. Settle in and allow yourself to idle. And as I'm recording this episode in the summer, my favorite way to moodle is on a vacation, how lying around is an activity. When your kids are little, you're not lying around, or if you're really into sightseeing, you're out, exploring the world. But if you have the opportunity to take a vacation to a beautiful spot of nature, just moodle, lay on the beach, sit in the woods, sit in front of the lake or the stream, and no explanation needed. Okay, so our last special word of the day is dabbling. Dabbling is trying something new and committing to it while completely detaching from the results. Basically, it's little experiments, little goals, little intentions that we do just for the sake of doing them, to learn, to explore, to experiment. But the real trick of it is to give yourself permission to detach from the results. And I'm going to give you an example of a couple ways I did that. So I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, as I was stepping into trying to figure out what is my creative purpose, what is my voice in this new phase of my life. And I came up with this little experiment for myself called the 50 and 50. And the 50 and 50 was 50 public engagements, presentations, appearances on stage within 50 weeks. And I made a little thermometer, and every time I did one of those engagements, I crossed it off and wrote what it was. And my 50 and 50 became things like a speaking engagement. It became a workshop for female entrepreneurs on how to give their pitch. It became singing with the Philharmonic on a beautiful stage in Dayton for a concert. It became speaking in front of corporations about transition and change. And so I didn't know exactly what each of the 50 things was going to look like. I just knew that I wanted to be open to all opportunities, and 50 and 50 just sounded like a clever little name. And I called it sort of my pilot, or it was like my season of speaking. And for my particular reason, my particular purpose, I wasn't, going back to detaching from results, I wasn't in a place where I needed to get paid for these 50 engagements. So I was open to accept lots of opportunities just for the sake of exploring different venues, different audiences, different topics. And it was a complete lesson in what I love, what I don't love, what I'm good at, what I'm not so good at, how people were resonating with the things that I was speaking on. And it was a fantastic opportunity for me to learn and move into a new area that was now clearly aligned with what I wanted to be doing, which was speaking to women about creativity, about expanding their influence, about taking their business to the next level, about transitioning. But without that 50 and 50, I wouldn't really have had the opportunity to explore so many different, conversations and different rooms to be in. So I encourage you, what is your little thing you're going to step into, make a commitment to yourself? I'll give you another example. I am not a huge fan of putting myself out on social media. I have Clara who supports me in that and holds me accountable. But just this last week, I made a little bet with Clara that I was going to do one Instagram story a day, and I was going to do it for 2 weeks. And it was a short-term, very intentional goal with no outcome. I wasn't trying to get followers. I wasn't trying to get any new clients out of that. It was just to give me the permission to try something new. So think about how you could apply that to your creativity. Call it a series, call it a project, so that it has a clear beginning and an end. But I do want to say there's one thing that I want you to be careful about. A lot of folks out there, a lot of us are really great at starting things. We're great at starting, but not so good at finishing. So I want you to be careful to know that this is not a one and done. Sometimes things like this take repetition and momentum because nothing feels fantastic the first time because it is new. So you have to give yourself time to get through the experiment. Again, like my 50 and 50. Also, there's a fine line between dabbling, moodling, and being a finisher. There comes a time when you have to give your experimentation enough time to have a completion and not just allow it to just, pivot you or detour you. But batching has been a way for me to give myself the space to stay committed. Dabbling is sort of the focus that I put into these little experiments. And moodling is setting the intentional time aside to explore and dream and imagine as I'm dabbling. It's really about opening your heart to your purpose, to your next thing, about expressing. So I love the whole idea of dabbling, moodling, and batching, about opening yourself up, opening your space up, opening your time up to sit with your ideas, with your creative dreams, but also aligning with your values. Giving yourselves permission, allowing yourself to be right where you are, but having that permission to expand into new things. It all matters because what you bring forth into the world is so beautifully and uniquely you. And if you feel that desire in your heart and you feel that tug that there's something more, or you know that there's a new level, or you know that there's value you want to bring to serve others through your creative endeavors or through your business, it all matters because it creates the space, it creates the time, and it creates the intention to fully express and be all you're called to be.
So, Elle, when you were talking about your 50 and 50, I just had to ask you what the best and worst experiences were, because you have to have something that didn't go perfectly if you did 50 things, right?
Yeah, many that didn't go perfectly well. Well, and I'll just say a quick little disclaimer here. 50 and 50, so 50 dates in 50 weeks really took about 2 years. So it wasn't quite 50 weeks, but it was just a cute name that we could kind of hook onto.
Right.
So it took me longer, but I did all 50, and I would say I'll tell you the worst one first, and then I'll end with the best one.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. The worst one was, I've been in the speaking industry for 20 years because Curtis is a professional speaker, and I understand how it all happens. But I accepted a speech in front of a room of government employees, and they were not very receptive. In fact, they were very I spoke right after the state officials for their specific agency came in and announced several cuts and budget changes and upcoming layoffs and changes in protocol and processes. And so then I stood up to be, chipper and inspiring about leadership and how acting, builds you as a leader, and they could have cared less. Is that how you say that? They could care less. They couldn't care less. My friend Julie corrects me on that all the time. They couldn't care less.
Right.
And it was really like almost like barely an applause and deadpan.
Oh my God.
And I just didn't connect at all. And I literally walked off the stage and said, okay, I'm not going to be a speaker ever. I'm not going to do this ever again. And the advice I got was, okay, do 100 and then decide. And so I've done a couple more. I've done several more, and I can proudly report they've gone better.
Right. You did get an applause subsequent times.
Yes. Yeah, that was pretty tragic in the moment.
Yeah.
But the best one was because I was really being open to any kind of presentation, any kind of stage, and my background is acting and singing. I was invited to sing in Dayton with the Dayton Philharmonic. It was like a musical theater review. I think it was, the top musical theater hits of history. And there's nothing more spectacular than standing on a stage, and this was probably a house of, 5,000 people, and a full orchestra behind you, and standing center stage with the spotlight on you, and that is a rush. So that's definitely the top one.
Yeah, that sounds pretty magical.
Yeah, thank you for asking, and I think that's really important to remember that in the dabbling and in that experimentation, part of the goal is to have some failure.
Right.
Thanks for asking. If you were inspired by what you heard today, I would love for you to share it with a friend. And also, reviews are the number one way that this podcast will be able to help more people step into their creative life purpose, and I would be honored to have yours. I'm so grateful you joined us for today's episode. I bet you're here because you know there's something more for your life. Whether you're moving into something creative or letting go in order to take that next creative step, I have something for you. My free guide to graceful transitions. You can find it at lzimmerman.com/transitions. And remember, if she made it, you can too.